This is the DTV Digest, the podcast that brings you news and reviews of films which didn't make it to the cinema. And now, here's your host, Mike Parkin.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the DTV Digest. I'm your host, Mike Parkin, and joining me this evening, as usual, are Richard Hawes.
Hello, everyone.
And Stephen Lockridge.
Hello.
This week, we've got two main reviews. So we're going to kick off with the sci-fi adventure Colonials. Then we have a drama based in 1974 called The Walk. Our short shot this week is Kickstart My Heart. And our DTV Throwback is a classic, TimeBomb with Michael Beihn. So without further ado, let's crack on. Our first review this week is Colonials. A space colonist traveling from Mars crash lands on Earth to save a resistance stuck in the Dark Ages. Well, that's half of what IMDb said this film was before it started to just spout verbal diarrhea at me. So what we have here is, God knows what we have here, to be honest. So, I mean, I'm a forgiving person, Steve. I really am. You know, I can admire this film for its ambitious special effects and its production design, and its cast doing the best it can. But I cannot forgive a shitty script like this. This is a film which does not make a lick of sense. It pulls so many cliches out of its ass, and then it just sort of throws other shit at it just for the hell of it, without any sort of real grasp of, you know, any semblance of common sense or decency at all. It is just such a mess. So, I mean, when it first started off, I'm thinking, is this meant to be like Starship Troopers? You know, because we've got this stunningly handsome space cadet guy who is been selected for this mission to go to Earth to find out what's happened to the hundreds of other people they'd already sent there. So for some reason, they're sending like one guy, this kid, straight out of the academy. Oh, it's because he's connected. You know, his parents are ambassadors or some crap like that. The tone of it is awful.
Yeah.
It starts off with our hero being pissed on by a robot to wake him up. It's got the vibe of like a frat house comedy, and then it sort of kind of gets serious when the ship gets attacked and all sorts. It does have one or two nice ideas as it goes along, but oh my God, you know, no. Come on, tell me, how did you rate this one?
I'll be honest, I don't like these kind of films where it's like all green screen, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Like the first half hour is literally just all on green screen sets, and it never worked for me because it's completely obvious what's going on. It's cheap as chips, and you can see it. You know, there's no. It's not done well, you know. It's done on the cheap, but it looks cheap.
Yep.
Like the script is terrible, but it's all like set up for the next one. You know what I mean? Because at the end, it's like, well, you've not finished the story. Then it's showing like all these action scenes that aren't in the film that, you know, I'm presuming they're hoping to do in a part 2 and finish it off. But it's all over the place. It really, really is. I mean, there's no, I don't know, there's no sense of anything in it. No. I mean, the main guy, his acting style is shout or shout louder. You know, and when he bumps into the supposed death bloke on Earth and he's chatting, he's just, I don't know. It's 10 minutes of me sat in there talking absolute bollocks for no reason whatsoever. And it's embarrassing. I just couldn't get on with this at all.
It is so bad. I mean, the deaf guy. I mean, he was actually okay, but the whole thing. I mean, our main character, he crash lands on the planet on Earth. He loses his memory as a result of the crash, so he doesn't know who he is. But the colonel of the resistance suggests that after the mission that he's meant to be on, maybe he could go and speak to this deaf guy. He might be able to help. So what does he do? He ditches the bloody mission and goes to find the deaf guy immediately, which is like crazy. But then, the woman and the kid who was supposed to be helping him, and they're going, this is a vital mission. This is of utmost importance. Let's wait till the morning before we go.
Yeah.
Let's have a good night's sleep before we go on this super secret deadly mission. I was like, oh, really? Okay. Yeah, let's just drag it out for another 12 hours. Why not?
Yeah, it
was
didn't make a lick of sense. And
I thought this is written by a 10-year-old. It's written by a 10-year-old, I'm sure. There's or it's written for 10-year-olds. One of the two.
Yeah.
There's one line. I mean, the Android thing, which is it's another one of these floating head things that we saw in Vesper and a few other things. And he's commandeering this ship, and he suddenly turns to the camera and says, "I'd like to see R2D2 do that." And that was the last straw. That was literally the last straw. It really was. I could have kicked in my TV at that point. But, I'm literally at least 50 years let's see. It's 45 years too old to be watching this, I think. Clearly, I'm not the audience for it. Neither are you.
I don't think there's an audience for it, to be fair.
I'm sure somebody will watch it, but they're going to be in single-digit figures as far as their age is concerned.
Yeah. It disappoints me. You know what I mean? It's not.
Mm-hmm.
What's the worst of it? I'm not angry. I'm just disappointed because it. I don't. Maybe give the script another couple of drafts. I don't know, but it's just awful.
It is pretty terrible. I didn't mind the design of it. The production design. It's shot on a shoestring. They did the best with the the green screen stuff. I think some of it looked quite decent. The spaceships and stuff I thought were okay, but the script was what let it down. It really did. And on that basis, Steve, how are you going to score it?
I think I'll give it a 4.
A 4 is about right. So that's 2 4s for Colonials. It could be us. It could be we're just 2 old cantankerous arseholes. But we just did not get into this at all. Not for us at all. 2 4s for Colonials. Go check it out. Our next review is The Walk. In 1974, a Boston Irish cop faces fierce social pressure after being assigned to protect black high school students as they are bussed into all-white South Boston High. Now, I must admit, I wasn't looking forward to watching this. I thought, oh, here we go. It's going to be just like really, heavy-handed drama all the way through. But how wrong was I? I thoroughly enjoyed watching this. I thought it was very moving. That last sort of 20 minutes were both incredibly tense and then, really pulling at the heartstrings. What would your alternative title be for this film? I'd say something like Boston is full of white cunts.
Boston racist,
Yeah, so, I just wanted to sort of it made me angry. This film really made me angry at times for the right reasons. It's a really important part of American history, which is kind of brushed under the carpet.
Well, can I ask you?
Mhm.
Is it? So I've not noticed, and is it actually based on a true story, or
Inspired by real events? I think is what it is. I don't,
right? Okay.
But I mean, I would be really interested to know, for example, if the if all the racist cops did decide not to turn up to duty that day. That would be interesting to know for sure. This is really well acted. The Boston accents are lovely. They're really.
Yeah.
It's just really interesting to hear 50 different Mark Wahlberg impressions. But I mean, for me, the chief one actually is the cop's wife, who's like I don't know, it's from the Netherlands or somewhere, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Sort of Flemish or something. Yeah, which is really interesting, But yeah, no, I thoroughly enjoyed this. It was really well made. Really drove home the issues, I thought, and didn't shy away from the whole horrific nature of it. So yeah. How about you?
I wasn't as happy with it as you were. I think I thought it was quite dragged out.
It is a bit too long for what it is. An hour and 40 minutes.
Yeah.
It could have been a bit shorter, sure.
And it just seemed to be, the great white hero story.
It's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting they decided who the protagonist is, sort of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And it's not just that. It's like, it's not really told. To me, the more interesting story would be, the black families who are dealing with it. And there's not much of that. You've got Terrence Howard with his daughter, and that's about it. And it's only a couple of scenes. To me, I think it would have been more interesting if it had been the opposite way around, to show the struggles that they were going through. Because, I mean, you basically got a lot of white people bitching, moaning about it and stuff. It just felt a bit flat to me in that sense. I mean, I thought the performances were quite good. I mean, I actually even kind of enjoyed Jeremy Piven, who I don't normally like, to be fair. But he was actually quite good. And, the daughter was quite good as well. But you knew what was coming. That's what I mean. Was it based on a true story? It just seemed familiar, and you kind of knew what was going to happen, but you weren't sure which way it was going to go. But all the the backstory of him being in prison and him now being a cop and he's not falling in line with them who were like semi-gangsters, I presume. I don't really go into it as much, but
yeah, it's like the Goodfellas, isn't it?
Yeah, it just felt a little bit flat to me. I just think they could have done it a lot more interesting if they'd have done it the other way.
Rich, how about you? How did you get on with The Walk?
Yeah, I really liked it. I wasn't sure where it was going to go because it sets up all the stuff about busing, which I didn't really know, which I'd heard of, but I didn't really know much about. And I don't think the film actually delves into that as much as I perhaps needed to for context. But you can sort of get the overall sort of perspective on it. But yeah, I'll come back to the same point that Steve just made. When I'm watching it, I'm thinking this is a film about sort of race relations and about the difficulties of the civil rights movement and all this sort of stuff, and it's all about the white characters, which is really a bit unsettling. I mean, Terrence Howard's in this, and he's really good, really great, but he only has a handful of scenes. And his daughter, Lovie Simmons, she was in Sealer and the Spades and The Craft Legacy, so she's really good. But again, she doesn't really have a lot to do. It's all about the white residents and how they feel about the whole situation, which I thought was a bit
it is a bit so like not all white people, isn't it? That's kind of with having the cop as the sort of main protagonist, the sort of center of the film. It's that sort of like,
it's fine. I mean, he's quite a complex guy because he's got hard edges to him and stuff. He's not excited, but they set that up quite quickly at the beginning that he's okay. Played by Justin Chatwin from the Dragon Ball movie and various other things. But then you've got basically the film sort of introduces all these characters, and you're like, wow, it's Malcolm McDowell, and it's Jeremy Piven, it's Terrence Howard. It's got all these cool people in it. Malcolm McDowell seems to be, I mean, he's Malcolm McDowell, but I think he's forgetting that maybe he's supposed to be doing an accent. I think he does it for like 2 seconds in a couple of the scenes, like he's trying to put on a Boston accent, but he goes, no, I'm just gonna do my English accent. That's fine. Even though he's supposed to be like born and bred, I gather, from one thing. But Jeremy Piven's quite hard. I mean, he was kind of like the Ryan Reynolds before Ryan Reynolds, or around the same sort of time. He was doing the same kind of thing, really, and he obviously had Entourage and everything was a big success. But he's kind of disappeared off the radar. I mean, Mr. Selfridge. I mean, that was a random thing. He did that British period drama series, and he was really good in that. And he turns up in this.
Yeah, he did a film with Jonathan Rhys-Meyer last year, I think it was, where he played a stuntman. And he was really good in that. It's all about Jonathan Rhys-Meyer trying to get hold of this Andy Warhol painting. I can't remember what it's called.
Oh, yeah. Just American Heist or something.
American Heist. Yeah, I think that might be it. Yeah. Anyway.
Again, another sort of DTV movie. And but I think Jeremy Piven's really good. I think he's showing a bit of more. He does have range. I mean, he's great at playing the sort of smart ass sort of, guy, sort of Ryan Reynolds, these sort of characters and stuff. And he's in one of my favorite films from the 90s, PCU, which came out over here on VHS I didn't think it had ever even got released in the UK, but it did come out under a really weird title or something. Anyway, that's a really good film that you can't really find very well, but it's like an Animal House knockoff with loads of people in it. I mean, the cast is amazing. Jon Favreau and all there's tons of people in it. Well worth hunting down. If you want a film that's about an hour and 10 minutes and it's just going to keep you entertained for the whole time, that's a good one to look for, but it's hard to get hold of. Anyway, Jeremy Piven. So here he's a much harder, tougher character. You don't quite know what he's just got out of prison and stuff. You don't quite know, but he sort of reveals the sort of harder edge. But what the film keeps delving into is sort of the cycle of things, so there's like Jeremy Piven's son is getting into a relationship with Justin Chatwin's character's daughter. They've got both those guys have got a lot of history, and his son starts behaving in a way that's like his dad because of his dad. It's kind of it's sort of moving down through the generations kind of thing, and even he sort of, there are moments where you see his character, that this is very much a supporting character, but you see that guy sort of trying to seek his father's approval through it, sort of that I did it because of you, Dad, kind of thing. That maybe there is a little bit of a reservation about some of the sort of nasty stuff that he's getting up to. So they do that with a few of the characters. One of the other ones is Justin Chatwin's character, say the daughter. She's getting mixed up with it and falling under the sort of the influence of the the language and the terminology and the attitudes towards the blacks who are going to be coming into the school, and so she sort of gets in on that. There's a whole bit, so it's very much an ensemble, but I think although it's a bit all over the place in area, in places, I do, and I'd say a bit far too heavily weighted on the white side. I think this is a film that's got reasonably good intentions. It's got a fairly limited budget, which I think you can tell, especially when you get towards the end. It's kind of this big scene, and they just don't really have the most of the film, because I thought it was going to all be set in a school and stuff. It's not. It's all sort of leading up to. It's conversational and.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be a bit more to do with the actual integration.
Yeah, it doesn't. That's what I thought. I thought it was going to be right. He's going to be escorting them into the school, And it's actually no, it's like the whole of the summer's going to go by first, and then it's or a few weeks or whatever it is. I'm not sure what the time distance is, but it's that only happens at the end, and there's a little sort of code a bit of so what is that, what's the next step going to be with some of these characters, where are they going to go from here, are their attitudes and stuff going to change? So it's not wrapped up in a neat little bow, although there is a bit of there is an element of closure and stuff. But I thought I would put it up there as, it's not as good as like Killing of Kenneth Chamberlain, but I would say it's also a really interesting film about about this aspect of American history, civil rights, and that's and the police and attitudes, stuff that's well worth seeing.
It's interesting, isn't it, when you sort of look at this, and how rigid the divide is between the sort of the white and the black neighborhoods and things like that, and it is literally, it's like an apartheid.
I know, I was just going to say,
they had that sort of thing. And you mentioned sort of history repeating itself, and we're sort of seeing it now with with sort of things like trans rights and things like that, and sort of the attitudes towards them. And it's like, and what's really sad is that some of the black politicians who are actually sort of like, being anti-trans, and thinking, well, you just, you're now in a position where you're sort of tolerated, and now you're sort of kicking somebody else. It's really, really bizarre. But anyway, I digress on that. How are we going to score it, Steve?
I'll give it a 6.
Well, I'm actually going to go a bit higher. I'm going with a 7 on this one. I did find it very entertaining. Did enjoy it, and I thought the ending was really tense. When the bus turns up and you got the crowds and everything, didn't know how things are going to turn out.
Although there's that bit where there's a woman sort of standing in front of, I think it's the cop character, Bill Coughlin. And there's a woman who's clearly shouting, but there's no like ADR or anything, so it's like she's just shouting but not saying anything. It's like this really weird moment. And anyway, it's a budget limitation thing, I'm sure, and stuff. But yeah, I'm going to give it I'd say if it overcame a couple of those problems that it had, I would have said 8, but because of the weighting and the sort of bit little bit uneven, I would say 7. Definitely well worth seeing.
It is definitely worth seeing. Yep. So 2 7s and a 6 for The Walk. Go check it out. Our short shot this week is Kickstart My Heart. After a devastating injury, a young woman wakes up and must fight her own demons to survive and escape her own house. We saw this one, Rich, last year at the Fighting Spirit Film Festival.
Yep.
And it's really good to see it again. Glad it's on. It's now on YouTube. A very well made short, very well received at that particular festival. And it all came about because of the writer-director actually being involved in a horrific, well, I won't say car accident, but she was hit by a car as she was sort of crossing the road, and it sort of inspired, her recovery sort of inspired her to make this film, and it is really, really well made. It's interesting sort of seeing it again now and sort of really appreciating the camera moves and the editing and the way it all comes together. It's really, really well done. Steve, this is your first time seeing it, I imagine. So how do you get on with this?
No, I really enjoyed this actually. I thought it was done really well. Throws you straight in there, there's no.
Oh, it's nasty. I mean, I'm like, how the hell did they do that? It's so well done.
Just carries on from there, breakneck speed, but it's one of them that's actually got the heart to it as well. With the characters and stuff. Because it turns out, I think it's supposed to be a brother.
Younger brother, yeah.
Yeah, but he's already passed on, I believe. And it just goes at a cracking pace, and then it ends. And then I was actually very surprised to see, the actual accidents
Mm.
stuff in the credits, and things like that. That kind of brought a bit more, well, not downer to it, but it made you think about it.
So sobering, isn't it? Basically,
yeah, that's the word. Sobering, yeah.
It's yeah.
But no, it was enjoyable.
I think part of the, if you, the impact, if you will, of this is those sort of X-ray scenes. As she's fighting these demons, and it'll suddenly show you what's actually happening to her. And obviously you the implication is, that's the injury she's actually received from the being hit by this bloody car. And it is, it's harrowing and very sort of sobering to sort of see that, and amazing that she was able to sort of recover from it, basically. But so Rich, as I said, we saw this on the big screen at Fighting Spirit. How do you rate it now?
Yeah, it's great. I think it was either my favorite or one of my favorites.
I think it did. I think it did win. It did pick up an award, didn't it? I think on the day.
I think so. I can't remember.
I think it was Audience Choice or something. I can't remember.
Mm-hmm. I'm not going to commit myself to it. I'm not sure. But but I know it was well received, and I loved it. And I have been looking forward to seeing it. It's turned up on a couple of places, been sort of released at the same time on Short of the Week and Alter. I think it's also on. And because it's an action movie, but there's horror elements and there's psychological elements. It's a whole kind of, it's a real mix. I sort of best describe it as sort of an action horror, but it's more than that, because as I say, it's got the sort of dramatic part of it as well. It's it's sort of like psychological. It's sort of you can look at it as almost like a dream kind of setting, like an Inception or something like that. It's all about sort of fighting through a sort of this unconscious sort of state, and how like in Inception you've got like the weaponized or the militarized subconscious, and it's coming after you. It's like elements of it's you, but it's coming after you, and that's what this is. It's elements of her attacking. She's attacking herself basically, and it sort of manifests, shows as like monsters and stuff, which is all really well done. But the action's done by Josh Maybe, who we've covered a few of his films from his Rogue Origin outfit. They do a lot of short, including the fan films like Immortal 65, I think it was, the Iron Fist short film. He's done loads of stuff, loads of really good stuff. Well worth looking him up. He was the director and camera operator on the action sequence. Well, he was the coordinator and the camera operator, I should say, on the action scenes here. So that's why they've got that very professional sort of choreographed look to them. The camera is like literally following characters as they flip around and all over. It looks really good. And Emma Pasarov and her doubles, double or doubles, I'm not sure, do really well in the action. That's all really well pulled off. The cinematography is also really good. Got a really great look to it. Very, very, very good, decent budget look. This isn't like a low budget thing. It feels like it's you're watching almost like you're watching a shortened feature, basically. And what's the other thing? Music and everything. So the whole package is really good. I don't really like the bits where it's sort of, I know you sort of praise them, the bones breaking, the bits that remind me of like Romeo Must Die, basically, where you see the fractures and stuff. I know the point that it's making, whatever, but for me, those, although I understand the point, I didn't really like those bits myself, for one reason or another. But the rest of it I thought was great. So right down to the performances, right from that opening, say, shock moment, to the ending, which goes in a completely different direction, because it suddenly becomes this kind of documentary of over the credits of footage of, say, of an actual recovery from from the incident that inspired the film, and sort of goes in it ends the film on a very different note to what you think it's. It's a very thoughtful sort of film rather than it's not rather than sort of fist pump action. It's like we slayed the demons kind of ending. It's it's sort of like this is the first step, and there's a long road ahead of her kind of thing.
Absolutely, yeah. Yes, we don't score the shorts, but we certainly recommend you check them out. We've been gushing over this one, as you can tell. You will find a link to this in the footnotes below. Go check it out. Our DTV throwback this week is TimeBomb. Eddie Kay is a mild-mannered watchmaker living in Los Angeles. When he winds up on the news after rescuing a young mother and her baby from a fire, he suddenly finds himself targeted by a shadowy organization and only has an attractive psychoanalyst to help him. Back in the day, so this came out in 1991. Which I think is after Navy SEALs, I think.
Around the same time, perhaps.
Yeah.
Navy SEALs, I think, might have been 1990.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was 1990. Yeah, so just after.
Yeah, whereas that got a cinema release. This one went straight to DVD or to VHS over here. But I always remember friends couldn't figure out why, like, Bill Paxton and Michael Bean weren't getting starring roles. And I remember, we did see a film with Bill Paxton. It was some sort of, alien invades the sewers kind of movie. I can't remember what that was either. And the only other one I'd sort of seen him in outside of Alien or Near Dark was Slipstream. For ages. And Michael Bean seemed to have it even worse. It took ages for him to sort of get anything apart from, then you had like Navy SEALs and then this one. I did enjoy this when it came out. I thought it was really good fun. And I still do like it a lot. But now watching it and, being a bit more sort of media or sort of film savvy, I should say, you do notice that some of the editing is rather abrupt in this. Literally sort of cuts off halfway through a scene and just sort of goes to something completely different. The worst example of that is when he goes into the building that's on fire to rescue the girl, and it ends with him still in the building without having actually rescued anyone. It just cuts to the news going, "Oh yeah, you rescued her," which is really funny. But yeah, I think this is it's a pretty solid film. It could have been done a bit differently, if they didn't lean so heavily on the shadowy people being involved until later in the film. Then the whole, you could have been more paranoid about who Michael Bean's character is. You think, well, is he crazy or is he telling the truth? A bit like Mel Gibson in Conspiracy Theory. But anyway, Steve, had you seen this one before?
No, I remember it coming out, but didn't get around to watching it because I was probably, I'd be about 11. But yeah, I enjoyed it. It's basically like a male version of Long Kiss Goodnight, but obviously I presume this was before that.
Yeah, quite a bit.
Yeah,
it's funny. It's funny you should say. It's funny you say that because that's the first thing I thought of. Even though there's lots of other things that it's actually, probably closer to. Yeah. I think for some reason the Long Kiss Goodnight was the thing that came up first. I don't know what. I don't know why.
No, but it is what it. It's a solid actioner. Patsy Kensit's a bit ropey, to be fair. She just does a bit of screaming. But what I did notice is the violence towards the women is actually quite bad in this. The bit where he's freaking out in the hotel room and he, basically trips her up and rams her head against the door. I thought, Jesus. And then when the baddie woman comes in,
Tracy Scoggins.
Yeah, it is, and he just absolutely chins her with that chain. I'm like, Christ, they're not holding back on it, and it just gets a little bit weird where they find the base. That scene. There's quite a few different. It's quite jarring. The flashback scenes and the PTSD scenes and stuff like that. They are quite harsh.
Oh, I forget you're not from the that sort of period, so you're probably not you're not used to seeing boobs in films too often.
Not so much that it's the guy getting his throat slit.
Oh yeah.
That kind of it's quite harsh, the violence in this. So, I know I brought up the female violence, but just in general, I thought it was quite a violent film for what it is. But it's solid. It just goes as it is. But like you said, some of the editing is a bit weird. It's like either they didn't get what they wanted, or
run out of time or something.
Or ran out of money or something, and just cracked on with it. But solid, enjoyable.
Yeah. Now, Rich, I hadn't seen this since that fateful VHS release back in the day. How about yourself? I mean, had you seen it previously?
I hadn't. I was aware of it, but it's one I've never seen. But it's directed by Avi Nesher, whose films we've talked about previously, including Savage, which has actually DNA with this one, I think, because there's some definite similarities, especially when you get to that really sort of jarring, as Steve mentioned it, where they go to the sort of base where the brainwashing place, basically, the sort of where that was all happening, and it all goes a bit sort of sci-fi there, doesn't it? It's like the set is like really wild and a bit it doesn't really fit with the rest of the movie, but it's there. I remember sort of a similar sort of a setup, sort of similar situation was used in Savage, which was say about 5 years later. And that's also a film that plays with a character's memory, stuff happening. Anyway, but this is closer. Let's say Long Kiss Goodnight was the thing that sort of popped in, but it's very much Manchurian Candidate, I guess, would be the sort of main touchstone, but also Bourne Identity, which had already been written by then, but obviously we didn't get the. I mean, there'd been a Richard Chamberlain adaptation a few years earlier,
TV movie,
but it wasn't really in the sort of comedy. So the closest thing to relate it to for somebody now would be to say it's basically like a Bourne Identity. Although I would also say to certain people that it's like Universal Soldier: Day of Reckoning has some similarities as well. The sort of the guy who he seems like a regular guy, but it actually turned, he was part of a covert program, or even the guest, or stuff like, which also has Universal Soldier sort of elements, and it fits into all the Total Recall as well. So I thought that all worked really well. What's interesting when I looked up the trivia is like Michael Beihn is not someone that they wanted to get, the studios or the producers wanted to go with. They wanted like an action name, like a JCVD. And Avi apparently fought for Michael Beihn to keep the role, and Michael Beihn actually took a pay cut because he wanted the role so badly. And as you were saying, lead roles were not that common for him, so this was a good opportunity. It was, I think it's like an independently made film, but it was MGM backed. MGM are the distributor. I think it's out of print at the moment, but if you pick up old DVDs, they are in MGM discs. It's not on the MGM channel or anything, as far as I'm aware. It was put out in the UK originally by Entertainment and Video, but then later MGM, who have their own rights. So it's kind of a low budget, but it's got that sort of a bigger element. Like, yes, it is rough around the edges. I picked up on a lot of that as well. But the action scenes are really, really good. They're really intense. Mainly gunplay, but there's some physical stuff as well. I mean, they're really throwing some of the. I mean, so at some point I wasn't sure if it was the actors or the stunt people. It really seemed like some of the the main actors maybe were taking a few, like Michael Bean seems like he was really sort of thrown around in this. There's several big set pieces which again would not feel out of place in like a Universal Soldier or something, or a Bourne movie, of where the characters come, the shadowy organization come after him. One of them's Billy Blanks, which is pretty cool. We've also got the sort of the colonel who leading this group is Richard Jordan, who I recognized him, and I was just like, I can't think of what I've seen him in, and I looked up his IMDb, and I think the only thing that I've seen him in, which is what I recognized him from, was The Secret of My Success with Michael J. Fox, from a few years earlier. And
we've also got Robert Culp in here. We
exactly
in
Mercenary, which was also an Avi Nesher movie. But Robert Culp kind of turns up out of nowhere. I mean, he's probably I'm sure he's on the opening credits, but he just sort of turns up and he doesn't have much of a role. It's sort of whereas in Mercenary, he's like, they use him quite a lot in that film, and this was like, you've got Robert Culp. it's like is that the level of this movie? It's like they can just get somebody of sort of his career was in that sort of situation where they can get someone of his caliber and just have him there, because to me he's like a real great asset, and they probably don't do as much with him as they should. Tracy Scoggins was kind of on the rise at this point. I don't think she was quite getting into her leading roles at this point, but she's quite good. She's really good. Yeah, one of the supporting sort of assassin characters. Again, they get. Was it there's like the car park? Is it a car park scene? There's a big action scene in the car park. No, anyway, it's a really entertaining thriller. I would say thriller more than an action movie. Patsy Kensit is the obligatory love interest who gets caught up in the action in the typical sort of 80s 90s fashion. And it seems like I was wondering at first whether she was tied up with it, but it's no, she was just literally, it was just a coincidence, and she just happened to be somebody he met, and she gets to be the Ray Dawn Chong who gets gets carried along with the adventure and stuff, and ultimately becomes a love interest. And so I think there's definitely a lot of reasons to watch this. It's not perfect. I think one of the reasons I think maybe it's a little bit rough around the edges is, as far as I can tell, it was Avi Nesher's first American film, or the first of his Hollywood sort of cycle, before he went back to Israel, because he'd made several films, but they'd all, as far as I can tell, they were all Israeli films, with the exception of one that he did in Italy. And so this one, which does actually, it's got an Italian producer, Raffaella De Laurentiis was one of the producers of this, but it's American films kind of through and through. And I wonder if maybe that's why, because maybe he wasn't sort of on top of, he hadn't quite got on his game with sort of Hollywood thriller kind of assembly, kind of thing. But I don't necessarily think it's probably, I don't know. I'm clutching at straws. I just can't think of why it was so, you say, rough around those particular edges, when his films are usually so, from the ones I've seen, I say, usually so solid. Say Savage being my particular favorite example.
Savage was crazy.
Yeah, but say that was another thing, because that's like in Savage, it was very much modeled in elements of it, modeled on the Terminator, and TimeBomb, they take the lead from the Terminator. So I don't know whether Avi Nesher's got this real sort of interest in the Terminator, and he keeps sort of putting these elements in or something. But there is, it's kind of that. There's also, what was that other movie about the shadowy? Didn't Burt Reynolds did one where a shadowy organization comes after him? Was it Malone? Is it Malone where the shadowy organization comes after him? Can't remember. There was a lot of these around in this sort of time period. Anyway, this very much they came out of all the Watergate and everything, didn't they? That was why all these, you can't trust the government, and they're doing all this stuff. That's where. But I will say, the Manchurian Candidate, I really liked, as an aside, I really liked the Denzel Washington remake. which nobody really talks about anymore. But when that came on, Liev Schreiber was in that. I remember thinking that was a really damn good film as well. So, which I'm not sure if that came around the same time as Bourne Identity, but everyone remembers the Bourne Identity, but nobody remembers that one. So I do like these kind of movies. These, you know, the hero gets his memory back and say "Long Kiss Goodnight" being a good alternative example of that. And say Universal Soldier, Day of Reckoning, do a double bill. I would say this and that.
Yep, definitely. We found this one on YouTube. There is a very good copy there. I think it's a legit one, isn't it?
I'm not. I don't think it's legit, but it's one of those things where I'm not sure. You know, it looks to, from the fact that it's an MGM, it's got the MGM logo and stuff, and it's in widescreen. I think it's probably a DVD rip, but it's one of those awkward things of, if it's out of print, is it fair game?
Yeah,
I'm not sure. It's that kind of thing. So
I think if it's not in print, there's no other way to actually sort of view it.
You can find it on, you know, you can buy discs from, you know, whether it's CX or via Amazon or something, you know, for you know, if you've got one, it's worth, you know, it's worth a few quid, not loads, but you know, it is, I would classify it as rare out of print. You know, for some reason it's not on any channels that I'm aware of. It might be that it turns up on channels that I'm just not aware of, like Channel 5 or something. I don't know, but it seems one of those films that's just probably, you know, forgotten about, sort of tucked away, and eventually it will maybe turn up on a streaming service or something. But for now, somebody's gone through to the effort of sticking it up there. It hasn't been pulled for copyright, so I think it's probably that's the only reason we cover, you know, we cover it. If it was anything sort of that seemed particularly dubious, then we wouldn't be directing you guys to YouTube to watch it. But in this instance, if it seems there is nowhere else you can see it, we think that's reasonable.
It's fair game for the time being, for sure. So yes, that is TimeBomb. We all pretty much liked it. Go check it out. And that is the end of this week's show. So thanks, guys, for watching these films. The Walk was interesting. Colonials less so. And we did have a classic short and throwback. Don't forget to check us out on Twitter and Facebook at the DTV Digest. Also check out the Short Shots, where we focus on a new short every evening around about 8 o'clock. Thanks for listening. Tune in next time.
Thank you for listening to the DTV Digest. Let us know your thoughts in the comments and tune in again next time.